The weave of magic is shattered, and the gods are dead. The past is gone and forgotten. What little remains is dark and deadly, shifting, twisted runes, magical artifacts alive with whispering entropy, and once noble creatures reduced to haunted shells. The cadavers of dead gods rot on the landscape, and in every haven and sanctuary, survivors balance their needs against 1,000 dangers. Welcome to Broken Weave. I'm joined today by Emmet and Elaine from Cubicle 7, and we're going to be talking about their latest sourcebook and role-playing world. So very, very nice to have you on the channel with us. First time, Elaine, as well.
I've been on before.
Oh, have you? Oh, there must have been a sneaky one without me.
I talked with Elaine about Realm of Beasts. That's what it was. And
you weren't invited, Gerry.
I wasn't invited.
Yeah, you weren't invited.
But this is the real first one.
This is a proper one. Whenever I get to talk to people, it's proper. So, before we kick things off, to sort of dive into Broken Weave as a whole, it's a whole new fantasy world. How many people were involved in bringing this together? Because I've seen a lot of different names of artists and writers and concept artists across the board. Has it been a big team? I know you've been the producer on this, Elaine.
Yeah, the team has been really quite large, and especially with this project, we had quite an extensive concepting period where we really wanted to let the art team especially sort of run where their imagination went. We had this very solid idea to begin with, provided it was like the seed was planted from yourself, Emma, I believe, which was this idea of a post-apocalyptic tragic fantasy setting where the gods are dead and magic is broken. And then we let the creative team, the artists and everything run free. And we had we've got pages and pages, folders and folders of concept art at this point, a lot of which we've been sharing on our website as well, like sort of behind the scenes. And then we started getting a feel for this world, lots of evocative imagery. And from there, then the writers and designers stepped in and were like trying to make sense of this world. So it was this sort of almost backwards inspiration where a lot of the times you'd start with the writing and then commission the art to match. It's like the other way around, like we were explorers in the broken world ourselves, trying to make sense of all this surreal and exciting imagery that we were seeing. So it was a real big team effort that's all come together.
Fascinating stuff. So who wants to tell us a bit about the world that people will be inhabiting then?
Elaine, you can drive. I came up with the original idea, but it's been through so many people. It's advanced and expanded and only improved since my what if you couldn't use magic?
Well, I guess it all starts off pretty much at the breaking of the world. And one of the cool selling points we have for Broken Weave is that nobody remembers the time that came before the breaking of the weave of magic. So you could realistically use Broken Weave to tell a future apocalyptic narrative for maybe your homebrew setting, or like a setting that you love, or whatever the idea that the bad guys won maybe, or a natural calamity, or some god-killing hero, whatever. Regardless, the weave of magic broke, and it's kind of in a high fantasy setting. It's the equivalent of breaking a law of physics. So magic was everywhere and it held everything together, and now it's broken. And what does that do to the world? So time and space stop making sense. The monsters, creatures and everything that were all infused with magic start to twist and change in surreal and unusual ways. People find like civilizations collapsing overnight, and with distance no longer making sense, entire settlements, continents, etc. can vanish overnight or reappear somewhere else. And it's a very surreal world now that magic is broken, and in its place all that's left is decay, which is essentially entropy manifest. I like to think of it, it's the opposite of magic, where magic is like a creation and all that sort of stuff. Decay is something that pulls things apart and rearranges them and all this sort of stuff. It's this great big apocalyptic situation. All this once great, wonderful world is just in ruins around you, and you're left with a small band of survivors to try and forge a new path and foster hope in this new world.
Yeah, one of the things I think we had a couple of inspirations for it, or I know my initial thoughts, and I obviously shared with the team, but things like Dark Souls, Elden Ring has obviously come out since, but the book Annihilation, the video game Shadow of the Colossus, and then the Dark Tower series. One thing I really loved about the Dark Tower was that distance isn't what it used to be, or time and distance, where there used to be two towns would be near each other and now they're way away from each other, like on a conceptual level. So we have it in Broken Weaver that happens. Like, people have forgotten, they don't know what the map looks like, they've forgotten who their neighbors were, but your characters can actually put shape on the world by literally walking the paths. So if you walk and go explore and you find a haven and you start walking back and forth and you build these relationships between them, it kind of like solidifies that part of the world, and it stops drifting away and becoming malleable. So I thought there was something really nice about that. I think we did a chunk of development of this during the pandemic as well. So, that things like connections and community and being able to actually, reach out to people, also, start to permeate it quite a lot. So you do have this post-apocalyptic, but it's very much about making something new, I think, and coming together. And it's like, you're never going to recapture what was there before. So it's how do you build a community and move on from that, and what do you learn? What lessons do you learn from the past? So I think there's a lot of really nice stuff in there beyond the it's a cool, grim, post-apocalyptic horror setting, which it absolutely is. But a big thing running through it is the people around you and being able to rely on them and coming together as a community and found family kind of thing as well.
So with the world then, with magic breaking down and sort of the world itself not being stable, substantial, does that mean that there's no world map per se, or are there sort of, here's a region where people have clustered or races have clustered and they've sort of survived the apocalypse and this is what they've rebuilt, so you might not know how close the human havens are from a halfling or dwarf or whatever else it happens to be, but there's like specific areas where so many people have congregated that they are solid, they're mapped or mappable, or is everything just sort of up for grabs really in the world?
Yeah, I think it's we don't have a world map. Really, you can say, like, should we get this illustrated? It's like, most of this is going to be grey and empty, but I think it is, as you build those havens, they solidify, and it's whether you're reshaping the world or it's you're kind of rebuilding where it was, like that kind of almost fog of war you get when you play a video game when you start exploring and the fog clears away. But you can also lose them again. I think we have a lot of stuff in the book, and Elaine can correct me, where havens have been built and then fallen. So you'll stumble across havens that were once there, and you kind of discover another like mini calamity and why they fell apart and things like that. But one of the big things in it is making your haven, which Elaine, you had a good hand, I think, in that, along with obviously the rest of the team.
Yeah, for the most part, it's like your haven is very literally like the center of your world. It's where all your family are. It's where your community is. It's where you draw hope from. So when it comes to playing the game at the table, it's going to be your haven is at the center of a map that you as a group are building together. In sort of the vein of those like traditional West Marches style campaigns where you're going out into the world and you're discovering what's beyond the borders of your haven, but with the added sort of unique aspect of those places can move. So if you discover like a good resource or something, like a ruin, and it's like 10 miles away, but if you keep traveling back and forth and building connections, it could come closer, or the path could become safer and things like this. So you're sort of, during exploration and adventure, you're building that world yourselves and discovering it in a truly sort of surreal and interesting way.
It kind of gives us a lot of freedom, and I suppose for the GM as well, because we have a number of pre-made havens and things, and you'll make your own haven, but then other adventure sites and adventure locations and old ruins, and you can kind of just put them wherever makes sense in your world and start mapping them out. I think that was one of the things that's quite cool about it. Makes it easier for the GM to run. And we have some of that stuff as one of the stretch goals, I think, in the Kickstarter, which is little map markers, digital map markers that are for havens and sites and things that you can kind of build your own map onto a hex grid or something like that.
I also like the idea that you don't have to remember how close things are.
Exactly.
Because there have been times in the past where I've been playing games.
Wibbly.
It's 3 days march. Oh, but we were there a couple of months ago and it was 5 days away. You see, that's because you make connections now.
We have a travel system in there, and for anyone who's seen our Adventures in Middle Earth stuff or Uncharted Journeys, which was kind of an update and kind of redesign of the journey rules from that. The journey rules in Broken Weave are pretty much the same, but for anyone who's used the journey rules in Uncharted Journeys, you determine your distance. Whereas in this, the distance is replaced by the amount of decay in the world, which determines how many encounters you have and how far you go, how close it is, and that can change, which works really, really well for
with the settlement building and stuff. Obviously, that has really interesting role playing sort of consequences for you as a group as you start to sort of establish that. Are there mechanical elements built into that as well that help you as characters, and or things tied to the settlements that are mechanically sort of included in there as well?
Yeah, absolutely. The biggest one is hope. Which is literally when people come together and they share community and they share bonds and whatnot and tell stories and everything, it generates hope, which is in the broken world an actual force of that can halt decay and substitute the weave of magic in a limited position. Fostering a community and investing in it and building up and everything as the community grows, they can generate more hope. And then when you go out into the world, you take hope with you. So you're tied directly to, it's the idea that your settlement is behind you. And then hope is a resource that you can burn in times of dire need to shrug off mortal wounds or overcome a feat or whatever. It's that old, for all those lovers of anime, it's the moment where they think that they're down and then they spit out blood and the flashbacks to all the people back home that are waiting for them, and then they stand up.
The wind blows in the right way.
Exactly. It's getting that sort of, again, that tragic fantasy vibe in there where everything is stacked against you, and by all accounts you should fail, but by holding on to that hope that you've got people back home and you're doing this for a community, you can overcome those odds and whatnot. So there's a very strong thematic and mechanical aspect for building up your community and whatnot.
We also have generational play, so you can you're almost encouraged to retire your characters and then you skip ahead in the timeline. How's your haven doing in 10-20 years time, and then you take on maybe one of the descendants of your previous party member, and how things progress, and then maybe your old party member is an NPC in the village or in the haven or whatever. So there's a lot of really, really nice stuff in there.
Well, that was a really fascinating thing, adding in that generation system, because in the modern day, a lot of people don't necessarily have a lot of time for massively long campaigns that will last years and years and years. But if you could be like, right, this summer or something, we're going to go through a campaign, and then by the end of that, once we've reached that kind of the end of the storyline, we'll then move things on for the next one, and play different characters and experience different classes and that kind of thing. That's really
it's something we've done in the past. For anyone who would have played The One Ring or Adventures in Middle Earth, Gar Hanrahan wrote the Darkening of Mirkwood, which happens over, I think, about 50 years, a certain amount of time. I can't remember the timeline now, but you kind of go on an adventure and then you come home and you stay home for a few years, and then another part of the adventure happens, which is was always a really, really, I always found that really interesting and really strong. So having that kind of thing, because a lot of the time when you're playing your 5e adventures, it's nonstop, whereas one thing we always have in our games is we have downtime activities. You have a week or two where you go and just relax for a little while, kind of thing. So having those
do your job or something.
I think because of the way.
So I was just going to say, I think that's important because it's not a regular hack and slash kind of setup for the game. You're not going in there with the idea that here's our level 4 party, we're going to rip through a dungeon and come out with the loot and then level up. the whole idea is to tell the story of your particular haven and your attempts of your characters over time to try and fix the world around them or leave it slightly better than they found it. And the intergenerational play then really, can be very, very interesting and important in the long term, because you're able to point back to maps constructed by previous characters, or maybe a fallen settlement that you found before, told to by an NPC in the place, so you can add layers upon layers and really develop the world that your group is building together.
One of the things we'd love to do that we're tentatively looking into that we could do in the future is, somewhere for people who are playing in Broken Weave to kind of upload their haven and their characters and have like a repository of it, so that you could just go, oh, I'll put that in my game, and now there's like kind of a shared world kind of thing going on. So yeah, nothing solid on that. We're like, wouldn't that be cool? How do we do that?
One of the really nice things we do have in right now are we've built a system of trail languages, trail runes. So if you've played like your Souls-like games or whatever, you can find the messages from people lying on the ground or whatever, that'll warn you of dangers or whatever. So we built Try jumping, exactly. Yeah. So we've built a language, a trail language that lets the GM or players actually craft these messages using common phrases and whatnot. And then you can literally draw like a rune. So if you're a GM and the players are walking through an area, you can draw like this rune that was left on a trail marker and hand it to the players, and they have a little puzzle to puzzle it what it says.
Oh, wow.
And again, these are things that can be passed on through generations. You could leave a trail marker warning people, or leave a supply somewhere, things like that. And then like generations later, people could encounter, or if you're again doing a West March style game, people could be leaving messages for other parties that are, showing up and whatnot. So your Wednesday night game, people leave a warning for the people on Thursday at this particular place and stuff. So
hopefully the warden's not going to spend 5 minutes trying to hit a wall to see if it's invisible.
Yeah.
Try attacking.
Long enough, it might just decay. Yeah.
Well, what sort of things will people be encountering within the world then? So the world itself was magical once, but has started to break down. So I see things that appear familiar, but at the same time are wildly, wildly different than they should be, and in a very creepy way as well.
Yeah, as we've said, decay is the big sort of corrupting factor in Broken Weave. So it will take something familiar and mesh it with something else, twist it in a strange way or whatnot. So it's got familiar aspects of something, but it's different. So we do have an extensive
different.
I know. My favorite thing about the Speak Thieves is that people are like, "Oh, pretty bird. Oh, what's that in their beak? Oh, what's wrong with their hands? Oh no." And there's mounting levels of horror going on there. So we've got like we'll have a bestiary in the core book, which has a bunch of bespoke monsters in there that are, things like Speak Thieves and whatnot, which are they're human-sized birds that trade in eyes and voice boxes for knowledge, because they're incredibly old and powerful and whatnot, but they're also grim. So we've got those, and we've also got a system in there for what we call breaking monsters, which lets you essentially take monsters from like your favorite other 5th edition or like settings and apply decay to them, and it will grant them new abilities, twist them in strange ways, mutate them, or give them like some form of tragic aesthetic air about them and whatnot. So it's trying to provide like a good bestiary, bespoke things, but also just opening the door in the same way that we do with the setting origin, where we say this could be any world, this could be your homebrew setting that's 1,000 years in the future. Well, if you've got a species or a monster that you really love in your homebrew setting, well, decay them up and then put them in the broken world, and they're there for you now, and like quite a simple step-by-step process.
It hugely expands the options for players and GMs as well, because there's so many amazing monsters out there for 5e that you've seen, like the official ones, and then a load of other publishers have put out monster books and everything, and you can apply these things to it, and you have hundreds and hundreds of monsters potentially, as well as the ones that obviously we have in the book. So yeah, that was a really nice one.
I'm a big proponent of rat dragons. I think rat dragons are amazing. I want rat dragons in everything.
Sam Manley is a lot to answer for.
Very feral. So I never realized the Speak Thief was human sized. That's even more disturbing and creepy than it was originally. So thanks for that.
Yeah, that was one of the things when we were looking at it. It's like the monsters can't just be gross. Some of them are gross, but there's a tragedy to them. It's with always go back to that quote from who's the director of Dark Souls? I can't remember. But this dragon has to have a tragedy and a nobility to it, rather than just it's a gross monstrous dragon. Like it was once beautiful and magnificent. So it's a shadow of what it once was. So
delightful. Mm-hmm. So we've talked about the world and the creepy monsters. What are the players going to be bringing into this then? Presumably the typical classes are not going to be represented as people would expect them to be, or at all, maybe? What are we looking at?
So one of the core aspects, obviously, of Broken Weave is that magic is broken. Magic is a corrupting terrible force. So our player characters, their classes, they can't use magic. Even were someone to find a magical sword and pick that up and start swinging it, there's a good chance that's going to have negative consequences on you, because magic is a corrupting source now. So we've got a whole new suite of character classes, and they're all built around very sort of iconic archetypes of a speaker who is a diplomat and a politician and whatnot, someone who has powerful charisma, the ability to sort of convince people and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And obviously we have our warden on the left here, who is the one of the few characters who's got ancestral armor, because obviously this is post-apocalyptic, so having a full set of plate armor or whatever is going to be pretty much legendary gear in this setting, because it's had to have survived all these centuries and been patched together and whatnot. And they're your sort of your stalwart protector, and they're probably the most competent fighter in your group, because we also wanted to expand the character classes out to include the types of characters you might not necessarily see in an adventuring party. Mm-hmm. We have our sage, who is we've got them here, the concept art for the sage, who is literally their entire thing is just they have lived a hell of a long time, because there's no libraries or anything in the broken world, really, certainly few that are going to be reliable and filled with knowledge. So how do you become an intelligent know-it-all? You just need to live a long time, which lets you have these player characters who are this is an old lady who's joining the kids to share their knowledge and make sure they don't mess up. And we've got the same for the likes of the maker, who is an artisan. They're like a creator and whatnot, and they have expertise in harvesting people or whatnot. People harvesting monsters, harvesting people.
Careful,
easy. Spoilers.
I know.
Now we know what happened to that abandoned haven.
Yeah.
So there's lots of these character classes that they're also integral to the community, because you say, this isn't a traditional swords and sorcery. You're a group of adventurers who go around the place getting missions from taverns and killing 10 goblins or whatever. You are part of a community, and then a crisis arises that threatens the haven, and they put together people to go help that. So those people are not necessarily career adventurers, so it gives lots of room for really interesting characters.
Yeah, I think there's no rogue per se. We have the seeker who goes and looks, for old artifacts and things like that. But I think even conceptually, the warden, people would be that's the fighter. But I think important for us as well, the warden conceptually, they're a protector. That's what they do. They're protecting people in an area,
threatening their haven, or somebody needs to go to somewhere to collect whatever it happens to be. Then the warden is
exactly
like a patrolman almost. It's one of the things, whenever I was looking through the blog, it struck me with even things like the sage and the speaker, that they're not a defined class. It's not your role is this as a sage. A sage could be somebody who is a herbalist, a wise woman, a lore keeper, somebody who can write, whatever it happens to be within that area. So they're more broad archetypes of a style, and then within that you can decide what you're going to do yourself. Even with the speaker, it could be a musician, or it could be a storyteller, or a poet, or especially with the idea that memory decays over time as well for the people. Somebody who can try and be the haven's history, the person who's there to try and keep things going, or interpret previous speakers' art, or whatever. There's all these concepts that you can really play around with without just going, my job is to stand at the back and heal. That's my job.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
I love that, because it really draws the role playing to the fore with this, rather than just being, here's another world where you can batter monsters for bits. And I love the intricacies of it.
Yeah, and I mean, like, in the end, it's 5e, so it has that character class format to it. But I think I think with a lot of 5e class, a lot of time, the new abilities you get at each level are you fight better, or like that kind of thing. Whereas this is very much like, you get proficiency with tools, or you're better at using tools and better at talking to people, and there's a lot of that. Just still, hey, you're good in a fight kind of thing. Some of that stuff in there, but it is very much it leans on those pillars. Like, you're better at when we go on journeys, and you're better when we're talking to people and things. So it definitely expands on those pillars as well.
We've got the when we're generating characters for Broken Weave, we have a new system called the Life Path, which steps through essentially like key moments in your history, like your memories and whatnot, that will be, these are like the foundational things for your character. So you learned how to make this tool, you had a job as like one of the favorite ones is like a moment that happens where you have to stand watch over a bunch of humans that have died to make sure they don't come back, and whatnot. And that just tells you so much about like the role playing and everything of these characters. And you build up like 5-6 points in your history. These are your life path, and they kind of like tell you a lot about who your character is. And then after all that, you pick your class and whatnot. It's like, how did these experiences shape who you became? But then also those memories are at risk of decay mechanically, gameplay wise. We have a system called Memoria, which are, people in the broken world know that memory is fragile. If you stop thinking about something, in the same way that space will fluctuate and vanish, if you forget something, it can be gone forever. So people will make physical tokens to remind themselves of people, of places, of memories and whatnot. So when you're going through your life path, you generate this collection of trinkets, and you'll see that all our character art, they're covered in trinkets. There's trinkets hanging from weapons and belts and armors, and these are all memoria. And like when you're facing decay and everything, if something goes terrible, it might actually like destroy, damage one of your memoria, and you can forget something key and important about your character and your history, which again is this tragic air of slowly losing who you are. The further you are from your haven, the more you're exposed to decay. So you're protecting these people back home, but you're at risk of losing yourself in the wilds.
Yeah, there's some really great stuff, and when you run through character creation, it really gives you a grounding in the world. I think it's at the end there's a random for your class. You can pick your class, but it'd be like I think it can be random. But I'm always picking the class I want. But as you run through character create the life path as well as generating the memoria and memories, that also does your like in traditional 5e where you pick your species and your background. Like as you run through your life path, you'd be like, oh, you were you had an illness when you were a child, but you got over it and got stronger, +1 constitution. Or you were an apprentice to I don't know, a craftsman, you have proficiency in like leatherworkers tools or something like that. So that's actually where that gives you your skill proficiencies and your tool proficiencies and all that kind of stuff as you're generating your life path. It's much more like holistic way to do it, and it gives you a reason to have all these different skills and proficiencies and a story tied to them as well.
It was interesting talking about that. Obviously all these are absolutely amazing things for like pushing people to do a little bit more of that role play around the tabletop, and develop all these interesting stories about the trinkets that they wear and why they have them. But it's also I love that it's all those lovely nuggets that you can give to a storyteller or a GM who's just like, oh, I'm going to make your life living hell. I'm going to take all these lovely memories of yours and I'm going to do something horrible.
Yeah, and we get a lot of that from the Haven creation as well. I can't remember the name of the actual steps, Elaine, so you can remind me, but it's, there's like threats around your Haven. As you go through your Haven, there's different, the size of it, the people there, everything, and then there's tables for like the immediate threats around you. And I can't remember, Elaine, you would have a better.
You start off with like, why was your Haven founded? Normally these places they have like a group of people will have a specific reason for putting down roots somewhere, and so it's like why it was founded, and then what the surrounding area is like, what key features are there, is there a dead god sitting on the hill over there, are you atop an ancient like tomb or whatever, and you can roll up for like your biome, and things like you roll a selection of like initial resources that you have, so things you have in abundance, but then things that you're lacking. And also you roll up some initial like threats and problems that your settlement faces at the onset of your game. So it's very much, again, just really, you all sit around the table. Like the GM could do this in isolation, but when we've been doing playtesting, it is so much fun to do this all as a group. And then as the GM, at the end of your session 0, you have a collection of these, you have this really interesting evocative haven, and then all these people who are woven through the history of it and are grounded in it, and it's like someone tipping out a big bunch of toys and things that you can play with and endanger and threaten and all this sort of stuff. My dream is to see groups of people playing Broken Weave where they all physically have their memoria in front of them, little trinkets and dice and pens and everything, and the GM can like, give me the die, and you've forgotten what that means, you've forgotten what this pen means. It's like you can still use the tool, but you no longer remember how you learned that thing and all this sort of stuff. And
time to troll Etsy, I think is the
yes.
You've talked a bit about the fact it's written for 5e, but you've also recently announced that it's going to also be using the new C7020 system. Is there anything you can tell us about that?
Yeah, I mean that was something that came. It's been a bit of a month
for an interesting start to the year.
Yeah. So we announced that we'd be doing C7020, which is our own D20 system, kind of built on the legacy of the D20 systems that everyone loves. It was important for us to obviously be fully compatible with 5e going forward and backwards, obviously with Uncharted Journeys and Broken Weave. So, but I think you'll see hints of what's to come in C7020 in Broken Weave, things like the life path system, some of the other stuff as well. Uncharted Journeys, journey rules in C7020. I think a lot of the stuff we did in Doctors and Daleks, which people were like, you can't do Doctors and Daleks, you can't do Doctor Who in D&D, but you can. So we did a lot of non-violent conflict resolution, some really cool like encounter building stuff in there. So bringing all that kind of stuff, are we've been making 5e content since 2016, I think, when we released Adventures in Middle Earth. I think we were some of the early adapters as well. So there's a lot we've learned from that over the years. So it's kind of bringing that together and expanding on those maybe lesser utilized, I suppose, parts of D&D or 5e, that the other pillars, because it can often be combat heavy no matter how hard you try. And then I think, there's a couple of little bit of friction sometimes when you're playing 5e. I think one of the ones that often jumps out at people is combat can be a bit of a drag. So one of the big things for us is just speeding that up. And I think anyone yourselves who've played something like Soulbound, I think that was something that we achieved really, really well. So looking what we can learn from that to speed up the D&D combat and make it more narrative. But yeah, it's really exciting to have that and have Broken Weave as like the first little insight into it as well. And you'll see some of the stuff in Doctors and Daleks. We have more stuff in Victoriana, which we've been working on, which has like an investigation side of things. But I think it's important for us as well to not like smash everything apart. It still has to make sense for people, and it still has to work with other 5e stuff, or other stuff that comes out of 5e, like potentially something like Black Flag, and a couple of the other ones. But I think for us, so I think that for us, it's an exciting time once the we've been kicking around a lot of ideas for it. I think once the Kickstarter launches for Broken Weave, we'll take a minute and really drill down into our ideas, because the initial, some of the times you're actually like, I'm gonna fix 5e, whereas you can fix some of the friction, but it's layering things on top and allowing people to go, I like that bit, I'll use that, I don't like that bit, that kind of thing. But having it as its own rule set is very important for us, because it gives us that control and assurance going forward. That it's going to be a longer line, and we've lots more stuff coming for. We've 3 other books in the works, I think, for it as well. So yeah, lots of stuff. And again, you'll see hints of those books in the C7020 core rule book when it launches later this year, and then we have whole books on crafting and downtime activities and this is your life kind of stuff. So there's lots in the works for it.
Fascinating stuff. If people want to keep tabs on it, or on Broken Weave as well, the blog is a great way to do it, which is being updated all the time. I think
so much amazing artwork. Oh my god!
Yeah, we haven't scratched what's in there, and you should really go in and check it out for yourself, because in the developer diaries there's some great bits, and also the concepts that the artists were working on when they were building these together, and so sort of the features that they were taking from the mechanics and the rules and the stories, and how they were adapting that, and vice versa.
Yeah, I don't think we've shared any of the each of the lineages has a curse, that's part of their story. But we also have the when it's taken to the nth, when you are completely corrupted by decay. One of our artists has done the various lineages in their final grotesque form, and it's pretty grim. So I think stuff like the dwarves, their curse, like the idea being that all of the lineages, your classic fantasy species, they're all so imbued with magic that when magic broke, something broke inside them. So something like the dwarves, who would have been crafters and smiths, and we always kind of sort of equated it to the 4 elements, but they had like the spark of creativity. And when the breaking happened, they essentially are stuck with permanent like writer's block, effectively, where they can't create anything new, and they're starting to forget how to make the things they knew how to make, and they kind of gradually become more corrupted and become, I think one of the pieces are, they're almost like this big like lava monster. They're perpetually on fire, and they're just in this like eternal pain as they're being set on fire, but they can't die, and they're just this perpetual fire elemental thing. So we have that for each of the species, that kind of tragic story. So there's a lot in there that's pretty. The halflings are probably the most gross. They just become these like melty gelatinous things.
They become the gravy that they loved so much.
Oh, yeah. Why would you even say that? So you are bringing this to Kickstarter then on the 8th of February?
8th of February, yeah. So the Kickstarter page is up there if people want to follow it and be notified when it launches. We have loads of really good, lovely add-ons and tiers and everything like that we've been talking about. We've got a lovely collector's edition and some other add-ons, beautiful dice and things like that people can get along with the core book. So yeah, that'll be launching February 8th. Probably around lunchtime or so, to make sure that everyone in the various time zones can have access to it at the same time.
Do you know, is it going to be a long campaign? I know sometimes people do short and snappy sort of 2-week things, and then other people do...
we tend to just do 3 weeks, because it gives us a bit of a burst. First week, hey, we launched, and then the last week is, hey, last chance, and then the in between is, hey, here's a bit in between, which can be a bit of a drag. So we just we go with 21 days basically. So yeah, I think it ends on the 1st of March, I think, if my dates are right.
Sounds about right. Sounds like something that could happen with maths there, yeah.
I can never be trusted.
There you have it, folks. Keep your eye out for Broken Weave coming to Kickstarter then. If you've any questions or comments, please feel free to drop them below. We'll pass them across to Cubicle 7 and see whether or not we can get you an answer. But otherwise, take care. We'll speak to you again soon. Bye-bye.
Go ahead and check out our other content on screen now. And while you're at it, why not hit subscribe and remember to ding our dong. Go on, you know you want to click it. Go on.